Hey guys, Liz from Invoque, and it's time for another photography video. Okay, and today's topic is a bit of an interesting topic. It's a grudge topic in the photography industry. A lot of people ask this when they're just starting out. A lot of pros even ask this after a few years because they're not really sure. And it has to do with pricing your photography. Is your pricing fair? How do you get to actually pricing it? And how do you adjust it according to your growth? So why is it a grudge topic? Now, photography is essentially an art, and like all things art, it's a bit more complex than your left brain analytical thinking industries. So in things like accounting and in the legal industry and insurance, even in retail, people price very specifically. There are very specific reasons as to what they charge. They charge very specific percentages in terms of markup, and it is essentially priced that way so that that business can be profitable. Now, photography shouldn't be any different. It is a business, it should be profitable, so how do you charge very precisely? I think another issue comes in the fact that photography is seen as one of those creative jobs that isn't really a job, and even us creatives fall into that trap where we don't believe enough in it to take it seriously. One of the major issues as well is that in other industries, even in other creative industries like graphic design for instance, you're working as a graphic designer for other graphic designers, or you're working at an agency and you learn the ins and outs of that business. So by the time that you start your own business, you know exactly what to charge for. With photography, that's slightly different. Why is it different? Because it's not likely, or it's not very common that a photographer would have worked for another photographer specifically within their career before they started a business. Generally, photographers work for agencies or charge agencies. They work as freelancers, or they work for the general public. So it's very difficult unless you've been a second shooter to really see the ins and outs of pricing. It's not like we're taught in photography school how to price either, if you've gone to school learning photography there. So there's all these things that makes us kind of uneducated on the topic of costing effectively. Hopefully this video will give you a different outlook on costing and hopefully make it a bit more fun for you. What are the major ways of pricing? So one of the very common practices within South Africa is to charge per hour. A common amount that I've seen from other photographers is that people charge 850 Rand per hour. So let's take Sarah. Sarah is an events photographer. She charges a client for 2 hours at an event 1,700 Rand. Okay, that includes an editing fee of about 30 photographs in total. And this varies from photographer to photographer. Some photographers will take what they call trigger happy and take about 100 photographs an hour. Others will only take 10 to 20 an hour. And that just depends on the photographer or on their editing speed, because that editing cost is then included within that hourly package. Now, what Sarah might also do is she might also do in-person sales, and she either charges a session or that hourly rate. And then for other photographs after that, and other products like canvas prints or albums, she'll charge extra on top of that. And when she's talking to the client, she'll be selling those products. So some people won't even have initial photographs in their sessions. when they if they focus strongly on in-person sales, and they'll do most of their sales outside of that. The major issue, what I find with this hourly rate setup, is that many photographers don't actually know where that rate comes from. They've either looked at other photographers and charged a similar rate, or it's just a rate that they feel comfortable with, and some will actually use a very specific method, and this method gives a bit of logic to the madness, and that is using a little math equation to work out that hourly rate. And that is basically using operational fees, dividing it by billable units, and getting to that rate, okay? Now, I'm not going to go into much depth on this specific calculation. I think it can be very straightforward once it's simply explained. And someone who's explained it very simply is Derek Whitten. He's written a fantastic article on it on his blog. I'll put a link in the description. And he basically shows you what different operational fees or what could be considered operational fees, and how you get to, how do you know how many billable units you'll do in a month, and when you divide operational fees by billable units, you get your hourly rate. He explains it very clearly, and I love the way he's described it. All I want you to really consider right now is to really look at your operational fees, because the operational fees are not just the operation of going to a client, the time spent there, coming back, the time spent editing, and the travel, obviously. It's not just that. It's anything that basically makes your business operational. And yes, okay, many will say, okay, that includes your camera gear, and your software, of course, yes, but it also includes things that you might not be thinking of. Things like the insurance of your gear. If you're running a business seriously, insurance should be something you are considering for your business. It might also be your cell phone. If you're phoning clients from your cell phone, that is an operational device, not operational device, a device that makes your business operational. The contract also, it's an operational expense. And you're looking at the time spent speaking to the client, the time meeting the client. You're looking at various things like that when you're looking at operational fees. So just consider that. One of my major concerns with this method, though, it's a very clear method, it's very wonderful if you're doing it, you're very serious as a business owner already if you're doing something like that. But there's one major concern for me, and it comes in the fact that who's to say that a professional, a pro and an amateur don't have the same operational fees. When I talk about an amateur, I'm talking about someone who's not very skilled at the art of photography, but they've taken the step at starting a business. So they're still business owners. And those two business owners might have similar operational fees if you look at equipment and things like that. Should they be charging the same rate? So that's basically what I'm basing this video on, is that there are other things that influence your costing that I believe you should look at. Okay, so what other things can influence your pricing? There's a fantastic YouTuber and designer called Phillip van Dusen, and he's actually done a video on what I'm about to do. So I'm in no way, I didn't create this, it's not my idea. I'm using Phillip van Dusen's idea and applying it to photography so that it just makes sense for photography audience. This method is something he calls S.W.I.M.T.E.S.T. S.W.I.M.T.E.S.T. So what he suggests is that the size of the client, what type of work you do, in his case it's design, in this case it's photography. What type of photography do you do? The impact of the work, the market rate, the time it takes to make the product, the experience of the creative, the skill set required to do the job effectively, and the attitude of the client. Now that last one's a funny one. It's basically the attitude of the client. So what it gets to when he talks about the size of the client is that a big corporate is willing to pay a lot more than an individual for a specific service or product. So, charging one single hourly rate for a big corporate and an individual doesn't really make sense because a big corporate is willing to pay more. So let's take a specific example. I'll use event photography specifically, and we'll look at a big corporate first. So a big corporate wants to wine and dine their clients. They organize a big 2-day conference where they provide very quality content to their clients through speakers, through food, and through offering a specialized photography service. So you look at that event, and let's give an amount that I'm just taking out of the air, 90,000 Rand. Now at first you'd think for a 2-day event, 90,000 Rand sounds like a lot. But if you start breaking it down as to what they're willing to pay for, you might get a different picture of it. So, a photo booth might be something they would consider because they want something fun for their clients. That photo booth will have studio lighting and props, okay? Then they want general event coverage, and then on top of that they want someone to take specific photos of the stage only. As one single person for 2 days, you might not be able to get all the shots. So you'd want to get another photographer in on the photo booth to be there permanently. Then you'd get a photographer to cover the stage. Then you might want, because it's a big event, another photographer other than yourself to do the general event coverage. On top of that, you might want to consider getting an assistant for the photo booth to help with the lighting and so on, and then you might need another assistant just to fill in the gaps for in case. Then you're looking at travel to the event, you're looking obviously at the different staff members' rates for those 2 days, and you're looking at covering their food because it's a 2-day event. Now you're also thinking of the editing and your operational fees on top of that when you're quoting. So looking at 90,000 Rand doesn't sound too bad, does it? Now, if you had to take that event and you're looking at a small to medium-sized business with not a lot of employees, and they're also doing a conference, but in their budget they might not do a 2-day conference, they might do a slightly smaller conference for 1 day. Does that mean that you charge 45,000 Rand for that day? And does it mean that you need so many staff members to contribute to the project? Now, they're likely not able to pay 45,000 Rand within an event budget because they're a smaller client. So you might still want one photographer for a photo booth, and then you want yourself to do the coverage on the stage. And that's 2 photographers, you might want to get an assistant in. That still does not equate to the 45,000 Rand because it's not half. So you're looking at maybe charging around 25 to 30,000 Rand for that 1-day event. When you're looking at an individual, they might not do a full day event. They might only want to wine and dine their very special clients. It would be something like a wine and cheese for 2 to 3 hours. And maybe there is a prop booth section, maybe it's not, maybe you make it, or the client makes it in such a way that people can use their cell phones to do that kind of thing. So you might want to get another photographer or not. I would suggest maybe an amount around 10,000 Rand would be doable for such an event, or even a little bit less, depending on the time. But as you can see, depending on the size of your client, you will be charging differently. So size of client matters and it influences your costing. Moving on to the rest of S.W.I.M.T.E.S.T, what type of photography? Wedding photography and corporate photography and product photography and boudoir photography and wildlife photography and will be charged differently. Additionally, the amount of photographs in events, people generally want a lot more photographs than they want for a portrait session. That will influence the price. Moving on to the eye, to the impact of your work. Now, Phillip van Dusen explains it quite well in the sense that he talks about if you create a logo as a designer, what is the impact of that logo? Is it for a big brand? Are a lot of people going to see it? Or is it for a smaller agency or a small company and it's only going to have a small reach? Because If you're making a logo for a company like Nike, who has big brand value, the actual logo has monetary value as well, and you might want to charge a lot more. I want to look at it from a slightly different perspective. So I want to look at what type of coverage is your work getting, and can you use that work again within your own marketing to make impact for your business? For instance, is your photograph going to be showcased in a magazine? How many people are going to see the magazine? Might I want to do it for less because I know it's going to be in a magazine and I know it's going to bring me more coverage, meaning more clients possibly. And then M. So M stands for market rate. So if you're already looking at your competitors and how much they're charging, good for you. So you're already looking at realistically what you're able to charge. You can also look at things like SAFRIA, the South African Freelancing Association, where they have very specific rates within photography about what people generally charge, what the general average is for people charging for specific types of photography. The reason you look at that is so that you can see whether your price is fair, whether you're overcharging, whether you're undercharging. And in a country like South Africa, where you get packages for 3,000 Rand for a wedding, and you constantly feel like people aren't using you because you're too expensive because there's a 3,000 Rand photographer, you must also understand then where you fit in the market. Are you a more professional photographer offering a better quality of photography than the 3,000 Rand photographer? So there's a marketplace and different market rates for different levels of photography, if you will. The first T in the test part stands for time. What I really want you to understand about time is that your time is valuable, and it's not just the time dealing with the client. So it's not just the time speaking to the client, emailing the client, meeting the client. The time is also about your general business operation. So the time you spend on marketing, the time you spend doing other things is still valuable, and it still contributes to your end product. E stands for experience. So again, we're falling onto that idea of beginner versus professional. And I just want to say that obviously someone has a lot more knowledge in the field and has taken a lot more time to perfect their photography will be a professional, and a beginner will be a beginner and charge a different rate for that. So that level of experience will influence costing. Time is not directly equated to experience. Just because you've been doing something for 10 years doesn't make you more knowledgeable than someone who's been doing it for 2 years. I know a lot of photographers that have only been doing photography for 2 years, and they push themselves, they're very skillful, and they're great, amazing photographers. So skills and experience are closely related, but I don't want to talk about the experience behind your work or the knowledge behind your work necessarily. I want to look at the things that make you more skillful. Some of those things, for instance, are studio lighting, natural light shooting. Do you know off-camera flash? How good are you at retouching? What type of retouching? So how versatile are you at retouching? In terms of studio lighting, now, how well do you understand studio lighting? Do you know if you adjust the light in a specific way, what it's going to do to your subject or to the background of your subject? Do you know various different lighting positions to give you different effects? Do you understand what it does to your subject matter? Do you know if it gives a cinematic feel or a specific emotive feel to your photograph? Do you like off-camera flash? Are you not doing off-camera flash because you are too scared to start using off-camera flash? Do you not understand how flash works? What I'm suggesting is that specific skill or equipment style will give you a skill, and you can price accordingly if you're the expert within that skill set. Similarly with retouching, whether you're you're paying someone else for retouching and it's amazing, that's part of your service, so you can also charge a higher rate. But if you're a great retoucher yourself and you can do various types of retouching, like beauty edits, dream-like fairy tale world edits with composites, or you're just doing average looking edits, that in itself is an art if you want a natural looking photograph for a specific client. So those are all things you can consider. Okay, so the attitude of your client does matter because it can influence your pricing. I've learned this firsthand. A more difficult client might result in you taking longer to execute the job and to satisfy that client. For instance, look at a big corporate where there's 10 decision makers. It might take a lot longer for them to be happy and proof your artwork, and that might also result in a delayed payment. So these are things you can consider then when pricing, when you look at that client and going, do I want to work with that client? Do I want to charge the client more because I know they're going to be slightly more difficult? I just want to take a moment to thank Phillip van Dusen. I think that his S.W.I.M.T.E.S.T model is a great method to use within costing, and that photographers can learn a lot about this model. I myself am quite surprised, and I've actually thought of these things in the last few months quoting my clients, and it's actually worked for me. I've become a lot happier in my craft from using this method. Have fun with this method. Let me know if it works for you and whether it improves your business. It has improved my business and I've been happier for it, so that's a plus. Additionally, I'm also looking to interview photographers on Invoque, and right now I'm actually sourcing and speaking to a few photographers who want to come on board and show me and you what their speciality is. It's going to be quite a bit of fun, so we're looking at maybe launching towards the end of March or beginning of April with that. Therefore, if you are a photographer and you think that you can add value to the photography community, don't be shy, contact me. I would really like to hear from you and see if we can do a fun interview together. And if you know of another photographer that you would really like to see on Invoque, also contact me. Let me know in the comments. Contact me on social media, whatever, I'm open for it. One last thing, as I don't really go into the operational cost divided by billable units calculation, if you want a specific video on it, if there's demand, I'll do a video on it, or I'll get an expert in to explain that in more detail. Let me know. I'll probably only do that if that's on demand though. So you have to engage, please do. Have a lovely week and stay inspired.